Welcome. This is James Corbett of the Corbett Report with your eye-opener report from BoilingFrogsPost.com for the 6th day of July, 2011. Last month, the eye-opener investigated the Transparency Award that was bestowed on President Obama this past March by a bevy of government watchdog NGOs who are ostensibly advocating for more government openness. As we saw in that report, dozens of high-profile government whistleblowers and organizations have launched a petition at takeawardback.org calling on these NGOs to rescind the award in light of the Obama administration's abysmal record of government secrecy and unprecedented levels of whistleblower prosecution. In response to the petition, one of the NGOs named in our report posted a reply defending its decision to honor Obama on the transparency issue and questioning the motives of those opposing that decision. In the rebuttal, Daniel Bryan of the Project on Government Oversight wrote, "It is undeniable that the Obama administration has achieved more openness than any other recent president," adding that public debate and disclosure is often healthy, but there is so much to be done to safeguard our rights and expand openness. Our community just doesn't have the luxury to waste time on distractions. Exactly how drawing attention to draconian government secrecy practices and opening a debate about whether the president deserves to be honored for failing to live up to his campaign promises is a distraction from the task of safeguarding rights and expanding openness is not clear. But a new investigation into the funding sources of the very NGOs who are supposed to be holding the government's feet to the fire reveals some alternative explanations for why these organizations are so reluctant to call out the Obama administration for its egregious expansion of government secrecy. In 2010 alone, the Project on Government Oversight received $400,000 in funding from the Carnegie Corporation of New York, $450,000 from the Ford Foundation, and $700,000 from George Soros' Open Society Institute. Other major contributors to POGO in recent years have included the Plowshares Fund, the Rockefeller Family Fund, and ironically enough for an organization devoted to transparency and openness, 3 anonymous donors. While it is of course impossible to speculate on the conflicts of interest that those anonymous contributions to POGO may be obscuring, the linkages between their on-the-record funders and the very government officials they are supposed to be watching over are readily documentable. The current chairman of the Carnegie Corporation is Thomas Kean, the co-chair of the 9/11 Commission. Carnegie President Varden Gregorian is an Obama appointee on the President's Commission on White House Fellowships. Ford Foundation President Luis Ubiñas was nominated by Obama to serve on the U.S. Advisory Committee on Trade Policy and Negotiation. Rockefeller Foundation Managing Director Ariel Pablos Mendez was nominated in March of this year by President Obama to be the Assistant Administrator for Global Health of USAID. Individual POGO donor Alida Rockefeller Messenger is the sister of Senator Jay Rockefeller, who learned of Bush's illegal warrantless wiretapping program in 2003 and yet did not tell the public about it until 4 days after the New York Times published an article revealing the program's existence. The question of whether these board members, directors, trustees, and presidents with direct ties to the Obama administration would be interested in funding an organization that was willing to engage in a thoroughgoing critique of the president, or whether people like the sister of Senator Jay Rockefeller have a vested interest in shielding people like Senator Rockefeller from the scrutiny of organizations like the Project on Government Oversight, is not an idle question. It goes directly to the question of how financing drives or even sets the agenda of an organization like POGO, which has gone from receiving under $350,000 to fund its operations in 1998 to over $3.5 million in fiscal 2009, a tenfold increase in funds. Earlier this week, I had the chance to talk to Julia Davis, a Customs and Border Protection whistleblower who's been investigating the links between government watchdog organizations like POGO and the foundations that are funding them.
At first, my attention peaked on the Project on Government Oversight and their sister agency, Government Accountability Project, when the Whistleblower Protection Enhancement Bill was pending in Senate. Because after I read the bill, I saw that it was full of poison pills that would hurt whistleblowers more than help them. And it is at that point that I started writing about those agencies in particular, because it seemed to me that they are on the wrong track and not as concerned about the rights of whistleblowers as they should be, and instead of that, more concentrating on appearances and getting something passed versus getting meaningful legislation passed. But after that, I started looking into the background of POGO, And also, what really brought this to a hit was when they gave a transparency award to President Obama. I think that came to as a shock to everyone because this is the administration that has prosecuted more whistleblowers than any other American presidency had ever attempted to do. And it's not over. We haven't seen the rest of it yet. I'm sure that more is yet to come. And during all of this, when they were speaking out against the prosecutions of Thomas Drake and other ongoing prosecutions, for them to give this transparency award was a real red flag. But looking into Pogo and who gives them funding, the Rockefellers, the Carnegie Group, and several other organizations, as well as some anonymous donors that I would really be curious to find out who they are. But the organizations that we already know are supporting Pogo are very active Obama supporters. And to me, it's apparent that they're trying to please these foundations to make sure that they continue to receive this multi-million dollar grants and funding versus representing the interests of whistleblowers.
The suggestion that the major foundations are in fact using their grants for political influence and not for altruistic philanthropy is in fact a charge that has been confirmed by various congressional committees. At the turn of the 20th century, various 19th century American robber barons, including John D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie, were beginning to endow charitable foundations as tax shelters for their incalculable fortunes and to use that wealth to influence the political climate by covert means. In 1912, the Congressional Commission on Industrial Relations, better known as the Walsh Commission after its chairman Frank P. Walsh, heard testimony from such witnesses as future Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis that these foundations were inconsistent with democracy and represented a new and possibly uncontrollable form of political power. The Commission recommended that the foundations be regulated and chartered by Congress. In 1953, Congress commissioned the Reese Committee to look into the political influence of the tax-exempt foundations. The committee was granted unprecedented access to the entirety of the meeting minutes for the board of directors of the Carnegie Corporation since its inception. What was found in those records stunned the committee's researchers, including the head researcher, Norman Dodd.
We are now at the year 1908, which was the year that the Carnegie began operations. And in that year, the trustees, meeting for the first time, raised a specific question, which they discussed throughout the balance of the year in a very learned fashion. And the question is there any means known more effective than war, assuming you wish to alter the life of an entire people? And they conclude that no more effective means than war to that end is known to humanity. So then in 1909 they raised the second question and discussed it, namely, how do we involve the United States in a war? Then finally, they answer that question as follows. We must control the State Department. And then that very naturally raises the question of how do we do that? And they answer it by saying we must take over and control the diplomatic machinery of this country. And finally, they resolve to aim at that as an objective.
Last week, Andrew Gavin Marshall, a research associate at the Center for Research on Globalization, appeared on the Corbett Report to discuss the history of the political influence of the tax-exempt foundations.
But these foundations were essentially created as engines of social engineering. And their main focus initially, actually the Rockefeller Foundation was created in the midst of a huge scandal for the Rockefellers. There was a mining strike in Colorado, and the Rockefellers paid the National Guard to go in and crush it, and this was referred to as the Ludlow Massacre, in which several women and even children were killed. This created a huge essentially public relations fiasco for the Rockefellers. So the Rockefeller Foundation emerged at this time to sort of counteract that on the part of the foundation, while the company, the Rockefeller Standard Oil mining interests, they countered it with the emergence of public relations. The Rockefeller Foundation itself countered it with the construction of ideology. Now, this is where the foundations really come into play. Their purpose is essentially to create consent to the hegemony of the ruling class, whether it's an empire like America or whether it's an oligarchy like the Rockefellers, Morgans, etc., or both. The aim is to create consent to the hegemonic powers. In one way that hegemony is ordered is through coercion. This is the obvious mechanism of the state, police, military, etc. However, consent is a little more insidious and creates a more lasting power structure. In this sense, these foundations were created to engineer ideology, both on the part of elites and on the part of academics and the rest of society, but they also steer social movements. So a lot of what they've been doing since their beginning is to control social movements and to steer them in directions that are safe for elites. The foundations initially were very much involved in eugenics and promoting this as an elite ideology. They further strengthened and organized elite ideology through the creation of think tanks. The Rockefeller Foundation and Carnegie Corporation were central in the creation of the Council on Foreign Relations, the Foreign Policy Association, the Brookings Institution, the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, the Bilderberg Group, and the Trilateral Commission, just to name a few of the big ones. These think tanks bring together elites from all realms of society, organize them to create a consensus among elites in terms of policy issues. They also form the sort of globalist or international ideas that have sprouted out from these types of think tanks. Further, the foundations, Rockefeller Foundation and Carnegie Corporation, in the 1920s, in 1924, they established the Social Science Research Council. This is a sort of a front organization through which they would pass money to various universities, creating and essentially molding the disciplines of political science, economics, sociology, and many other fields of study. In this sense, they shaped the academic discipline itself. And so the people who study political science, people who study economics, the people who study sociology, they go through programs that are largely engineered by these major foundations in order to produce people who are able to properly manage the society that these foundations are pivotal in engineering.
Given this documented history of political, academic, economic, and societal subversion by the directors of these corporate foundations, how can one not look skeptically on supposed government watchdog groups that are funded by these very same organizations? What better way would there be to make sure that favored political appointees, including ones that have been supported financially and otherwise by the foundations, avoid proper scrutiny than by funding the groups that are supposed to be scrutinizing them? Surely it is not beyond the pale to ask about the connection between an organization's purse strings and its actions, especially when that organization is devoted to openness and transparency. What influence do corporate foundation donors have over the organizations they are propping up? When confronted on the issue of Pogo's recent surge in funding and whether that surge in funds was related to the Obama Transparency Award, Pogo blog editor Brian Rahija responded by stating, "Pogo's funders don't set our agenda. They didn't with the recent White House meeting, nor have they ever," before adding that these well-connected foundations fund us because of our agenda.
This video is part of a new weekly video news series. Future editions of this series will be available to subscribers of BoilingFrogsPost.com. For more news and commentary from James Corbett, please visit CorbettReport.com.